Hi, I'm Chris from Code Review, and in this video we're going to be looking at a really cool DateTime library for PHP called Carbon. It's by a guy called Brian Nesbitt. Massive thanks and a massive amount of respect to this guy for doing this, for making this library. Basically what it does is, if you've ever done a JavaScript project and dealt with dates, more than likely after you've looked at the DateTime implementation in JavaScript and pulled your hair out, then you've probably switched over to using Moment.js, and it makes life dealing with dates and stuff a lot easier. Well, this is like the equivalent package in PHP, so effectively it just makes dealing with date times a lot more easy for humans, I guess. I found it on Packagist, did a search for popular repositories. It comes up really high up, most likely because of the 1.6 million or 1.55 million downloads. That to me implies that it's probably in use with a framework somewhere. If not, then massive amounts of downloads going on there. So there's obviously a fair amount of people that use this, but I've only really come across it quite recently, probably in the last 6 to 8 months or something. Ever since I found it, I've been using it on everything. Anyway, to get to the nitty gritty of what we're doing today, we're looking at how you can implement Carbon with your Symfony projects and why you would probably want to do so. So this is looking at the date times sort of out of the box using the traditional DateTime. What you can see here is the controller code as it says here, and then the template code. So it stops me from having to switch between this and the IDE too much. But I do want to show you something straight off the bat, where we're going to be going into the IDE just to change something up a little bit. As you can see, started off with a classic DateTime, which is just instantiating DateTime. And then we've got another way of instantiating where we pass in a string representation of the date time that we're after. And then in Twig, we can output that by just passing in the variable, and then we've got to pass it through a Twig extension, which tells Twig how to format it. And without this extension, we get a funny error. So let's just take off this bit and then refresh this page. And what you can see here is a rendering error from Twig, and what it's basically saying is it's unable to convert the DateTime object into a string. So there's no toString method by default on a standard PHP DateTime. So the only way around that is to put that back in and save that up. And then if we refresh this, it's going to reload and be happy again. So that's the traditional way of dealing with date times inside Symfony and Twig. So if we look then at Carbon, so just to go through how you get this, you go to Nesbot Carbon, just search for Carbon on Packagist, take that out as such. I'm sure this is not new to you, but I'll quickly go through it anyway. Composer.json and stick it in the require, then do a composer update, and voila, you get Carbon downloaded. So let's just go back to our project. Where are we? We're here. Okay, so this is the sort of like refactored way of doing this, and as you can see straight away, it's a little bit cleaner. We've got there's no requirement to actually pass in the date extension, the Twig extension, so we can just output it because by default a Carbon DateTime has got a toString method on it. There's no need to do any use statements, there's no requiring or anything, we just literally can start using it. The reason being that is that it's heavily utilising statics. Now that's good and bad. It's good because it makes our lives easier, it's bad because statics suck, but the sort of functionality out of the box just works. It makes life a little bit easier for you. Okay, so we can also, as you've seen already, just new up a Carbon object. By default it gets us exactly now, in the same way that a new DateTime does the same thing. Then we can just apply the format method to it, so we're just carrying on using the same object, can apply the format to it, and you can see here that I've outputted a UK formatted date, and then you can also output the Americanized version of it, which is what I've done here. Call it the wrong format. That's just an inline newing up a object inline and then immediately being able to use it. I think that's PHP 5.5 syntax. I don't think that's in 5.4. Maybe wrong. Then you can use other things on it. So it's got like the day of the week, and as you can see, it comes out in a numerical format. Today's Monday, so that's 1 through 7. Then of course we can still use the traditional twig formatting on it. So we can take the today object and pass it through the twig filter, and it's not twig filter, sorry, twig extension, and it works exactly the same as a traditional PHP DateTime. So there's many things that we can do with Carbon. I'm going to go through quite a whistle-stop tour of them. So we can say get tomorrow, and again you can see statics in action there. Just getting today, tomorrow a different way, so we could add a day to today, which is obviously going to get us tomorrow. We can say how many days ago, and then we can subtract from today, so you can do sort of maths with your dates. You can add, you can then do you can use a Fluent interface to build any sort of time that you want, literally, minutes, seconds, hours, days, months, years. You can add, subtract them, and then output them. So yeah, it's very, very cool. Carrying on, we can do time zones. So you can see got the all sorts of things going on here. Just your standard where we are now, 1 hour ahead. Tomorrow in New York. Now this is a little bit of a gotcha, really. It's going to go to midnight, which it is technically tomorrow, but what we probably want is the actual time from tomorrow. So you can see here what I've done there is called this New York properly, which is taking the time right now in England, then setting the time zone, so you can pass in a time zone, and then you can add a day onto that, so we're going to get exactly the time that we're after. And then these are just various ways that you can new up a date time with a time zone attached to it. Again, very, very flexible. We can use the sort of humanized format for getting a differential on our dates. So you've probably seen in Twitter, these 27 seconds ago, whatever, since a post was last done. You can do all that with, one straightforward method in Carbon. We can use that in many different ways. There's diffs in various different formats, days, seconds, hours, whatever, years even, and it will round it as well, which you may or may not want. But there's plenty of different methods in there, and as I can't really cover them all, I'm just trying to give you a brief overview of what's on offer. There's millions of different ways of outputting our dates. Well, not millions, I'm being a bit daft there, but you can see all of these are on the documentation, but you can get a sense of what's available. This one's super useful if you're doing anything with JSON. We can just straight away output it from using one method to be a JSON compatible date, which is really, really helpful. It's a big time saver. And yeah, if you're wondering what that means, Back to the Future, that's what that's on about, 1985. Going a bit stir crazy making these videos. So yeah, other things we can do, like Boolean checks on whether certain things are true or false with our dates. So we can see here we're checking today, whether that's greater than yesterday. Today is greater than tomorrow, etc. So you can see all these different representations. We can greater than or equal to, not equal to, less than, greater than or equal to. I think we've already done that one. Yeah, it's just different representations of the date time checks basically. And then lastly, it's not actually lastly, there is a few other things that Carbon can do, and I do fully encourage you to check out the GitHub page, especially. I think what's the one that I didn't do the video on? Let me just check. Is it modifiers? I think, yeah, modifiers. So this has been able to check effectively whether it's close to the end of the month or the start of the month or start of the year or whatever it is. These things come into their own once every so often, but when they do, they're like massive time savers, and it's good to know that it's there and just have a sort of an inkling of that it's there, before you when you do need it, rather than I'm not suggesting that you go and read all this through and make it, commit it to memory. The last thing that I want to look at, though, as it says on here, is testing. And I can't really do a good example of this, but what it's trying to get through is that we can fake the date. Now, this is it's probably more straightforward this in PHP than it is in other languages like JavaScript. But there we are, testing aids. The main reason I put this in is because if you're doing a project where you're relying heavily on dates, and it seems like more frequently than not, you'll come across some point in a project where you've got to check one date versus another date and stuff like that. Actually, unit testing, that can be a real pain, because if you're passing now changes. So if you had something that, say, you want to check when it's on a Wednesday, you want to do such and such. If it's Thursday, you don't want to do that thing. But you're passing in to your tests, like, how do you come up with that? So if we can fake it, so we can create a fake or known date from a format, then we can do various bits and pieces with that. And there's a good example here of how, depending on what month we're in, it depends on what multiplier we're applying to the price given. So you can see by default the base multiplier is 1, but if we're in December, then we want to multiply everything by 2, those sneaky buggers putting the prices up at Christmas, and then return the price times the multiplier. And we can fake by setting the different test date. So we can set you can see what they're doing is showing off how to parse a date from like a human written string. We can test what the value should be. So if we're passing in a price of 100, construct the price 100, put it in there, then get the price. If we're in March, then we're not in December, so our multiplier is 1, return 1 times 100, so the product price should be 100. Then if we're in December, product get price should be, it's December, so multiply it by 2, which should be 200. And then that's basically the gist of what's going on there. And if you've ever done unit testing where you've had to come up with some sort of date solution, then you can probably at least having a few eureka moments in your head right now. I know I did when I first came across this. It just makes life easier, basically. So that's Carbon in a nutshell. Very straightforward to use. One of them things where it's perhaps not the biggest revelation you'll ever have in development, but it is one of the most useful on a day-to-day basis.